I'm ahead of the curve, also known as James Bergman, and in today's podcast episode, I am talking to Austin Davis, author of Lotus and the Apocalypse, first published in March 2022. Lotus and the Apocalypse is a very short but concise poetry book, and every single sentence needs to be there. Every single word is tailored to be there to make the most grand effect on the reader to feel this kind of, I don't know, intuitive feeling that the author in some ways wasn't even expecting the reader to experience, but they do anyway. And I do believe this book is a testament to that. It's a testament to reading a piece of literature and not having this intellectual analysis afterwards, but it just kind of hits you with a feeling, it hits you with emotion. And that's because when you read poetry, every word hits you in a different way, depending on who you are and your background, your life experience. And that's the power of poetry in some sense. It's the fact that it can appeal to so many different people, but in completely different ways. And this is the first podcast I've done on a book about poetry from an author who's a poet. I am forever grateful that Austin he accepted to be on this podcast. I feel like what we talk about really gets to the depths of how it feels to read something that is poignant, and we talk about his inspirations, we talk about the writing process, we talk about world affairs for a brief moment of time. And so it's not a particularly long episode as some of my others lately have been, but I feel like this book, Lotus and the Apocalypse by Austin Davis, I feel like this is a really, really great book because I do feel like it can be read by quite literally anyone, but they can take something away from it. At least I think that you probably would if you haven't read it already. I hope you guys enjoy. Please leave a like and comment and share if you enjoyed the discussion, if you have anything to add. If any of you like to listen to Phoebe Bridgers as well as me, that would be pretty cool if you did. But yeah, let me know what you think and I'll get it rolling. Austin Davis, how are you doing?
I am doing well, my friend. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well. I was saying before we were filming that I love your attire that you don. And I think I think what people wear really is important because it's a way to express yourself. And
Yeah.
I've got like a leather trench coat just in my closet,
Oh,
just like, and I used to wear it a lot more, but I guess when I go back to uni I'm gonna probably wear it. But you know what I mean, like, I don't know, because you're pretty confident in how you carry yourself and how you own what your style basically, and I love that about you.
thank you.
And I really feel like there's a certain, I guess, flex in being confident enough to do that, like confident enough to be open about what your style is, what who you are basically, because it is kind of, I do feel like being fully open about your fashion, especially if it's a bit different from the usual, it's kind of like wearing your heart on your sleeve, and
Yeah.
that's pretty hard. That's pretty
Thank
hard.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, first of all, leather trench coat sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah,
So I would
yeah.
love to see that sometime. I had a leather purple trench coat for a
Ooh,
while
Joker
that I
style.
was right. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I gave it to a friend on the streets because she was cold, and
right.
yeah, so now she's rocking that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, man, I think that, for me, it's all about just being honest and just trying to be like, not just try to be authentic. Like, that's all it is. Like, if I'm gonna wear something and I like it, it might not look good, but it's something that, like, I don't know, it connects with how I'm feeling that day, or I just kind of like the way it makes me feel, or whatever. So yeah, I think that fashion and dress, it can just be like such a really fun, way to incorporate like that authenticity into like your daily lifestyle. And
yeah.
none of the stuff that I own, like, I don't own a ton of clothes, and the clothes I do own, they're all like from thrift stores and crap, just because I think that's kind of the way I like to do it.
Mm,
Old clothes that are cheap, that
right.
are a little funky.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know. I love it, as I said. And so yeah, we're here talking about your book, which came out a few months ago now, right?
Yep.
What month did
Yeah,
it come out?
it was published on March 1st. So
Right.
let's see how many months. It's been a couple months. Yeah, time is weird,
Yeah.
and it's been weird for a while. But
So
yeah,
how would you describe your book? Because it is a very short book, and it
yeah,
is, as I
yeah.
say in my intro, it's a very short book, but it has a lot of punch essentially, and it is poetry. But I think it's far more than that. And I just wanted to ask you the kind of a difficult question. If I mean, I'd imagine it would be because it is kind of multifaceted in what you're trying to convey, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. But
Yeah,
how
yeah.
would you succinctly describe your book to somebody if they were like, "What's it about?" Like, what is your go-to description of it?
You know, what I tell a lot of people is it's the story of a character who is trying to figure out what the point of life is by the end of the day, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in a metaphorical sense, I think that I tried to convey, you know, from the mental health aspect, like this character is trying to stay alive, you know, and I wanted to pair that simultaneously with, you know, an external apocalypse as well. But you know, I like to say that it's a poetry novella, I guess.
Sure.
You know, when I was putting this book together, you know, one thing that I really love about the form of a small book of poetry is that, as you said, you know, you can absorb it in one sitting and then kind of go back to it. And I'm a big music guy, you know, so for when I was, you know, putting the final touches on this book, and when I really had this idea, I was like, man, you know, I really want to, I don't know, you know, use the form of an album, you know, to write a book of poetry. That's really like that was one of the core, you know, thoughts that went through my head and like putting this together. And that's why the book is broken up into two acts. There's like that interlude that separates the two, you know, and you know, I think that poetry can be such a valuable tool, you know, for humanity in general, but just, you know, in our own lives, you know, it's the short form is so beautiful, especially in our fast-paced world, you know, that we can, you know, have this story, we can step into this little world, and then we can step out of it when we need to. And that's why I wanted the book to be the length that it is, I think, you know. um, I want this poetry book to be read by people who've never read poetry before, or who hate poetry, or, you know, have this idea of what a poem should be. I want to just break down all that shit and be like, this is what I think it is, you know, give it a shot. So I
Yeah,
guess to go back to your
yeah.
original question, yeah, I mean, it's about the last day on earth, man. That's what it is. And
Yeah.
it's all about, you know, my experiences with mental health. I have OCD and Tourette's and depression. So if you see me do like a little neck thing, it's just the good
Sure,
old
man.
Tourette's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, when I was writing this book, I was in a pretty bad place, you know, and I kind of felt like with my mental health, I was climbing this mountain, you know, and I knew that if I kept climbing, I'd get to a point where I could rest, you know. But I guess I just kind of felt too exhausted and I let go. And writing this book is really what I felt like helped me, you know, reach a hand out, grab a rock, and keep climbing a little bit. So yeah, I mean, the whole point of the book, for me at least, is to help people feel a little less alone in what they're going through, especially nowadays. You know, it's been a really rough couple of years, I think, for the whole world. And I think that art can provide such a powerful, you know, vision of hope. So that's in some little way, that's my main goal.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I what time span did you write the book in? Because did you do it in one sitting? Am I correct in that?
No, so originally some of the poems in the book I wrote, let's see, I think there's one poem in there called Lotus and Hallucinations.
Right.
And I think that was the first poem I wrote for the book. And that was in like early 2020, I'd say, late 2019, maybe. And that was, you know, I had no clue what the book was going to turn out to be. It was just a poem I was writing, you know. And then I started writing a few more, and they weren't Lotus poems or anything. They had different titles, but those were being written like early pandemic, you know, March 2020, April, May, the summer. And then, you know, when my mental health started to really decline, I just started to like just try to write as much as I could, like feverishly just create. And I I ended up printing out all these poems that I'd written, like there's probably like 30 or 40 poems, and I taped them to the wall of the room I was staying in, all over the room. There were just these poems.
Right.
And I grabbed a Sharpie, and I just like, I don't know how long I was in that room, but it, long enough to where I needed like food and water and to piss and shit after. So I just remember like running around the room in like a fevered, like manic state, and just like editing and changing titles and grouping poems together. And yeah, it was pretty cool. So then I had the idea. I was like, this is going to be a story. This is going to be narrative. And I wrote this poem called Lotus and Honesty, and that was the first Lotus poem, I guess. And then from there, it was easy. It all just kind of came naturally, But yeah, no, definitely not one sitting. It took a couple years to write that book, and it's a short book, but
Yeah,
it took me a couple of years.
well, yeah, I mean, as I say, like the book is punchy, but it feels like every sentence has been contemplated over. And this is something that I kind of criticize about. But I mean, historical books make this error as well, but under a different pretense. But I don't really like books that have a lot of filler. I don't like books that have sentences, words that don't really need to be there, that don't build up the story or the point, right? And what I really appreciated about your book was the fact that it did feel like every single sentence, every word was meditated upon. And
thank you.
At some point, I do want to read just a few of my favorite passages from it, but I don't know when we'll do that. But there's about three I want to get through. Let's just do it now. I just want to show my. I'm just excited to read it out for the audience.
Thank you.
I just want them to read, because the thing is, right, we're talking about a book, and you can have so many discussions on a subject, but the real question is, okay, well, what's the substance? And I just want to get straight to that substance. I really just want to recite
you saying, I really appreciate you saying, that each word and sentence feels meditated on, because like that's one thing that I hyper focus on, I just, every word has to be the right word, every sentence, every image, every transition. And it's something that I it's maddening to me, but it's maddening in a good way, like I obsess over it for real. And for me, it's it feels like a puzzle. Like when I write the first draft of a poem, it's just getting it out there. There's no editing. I just don't censor myself. But then going back, it's like, writing that first draft is like molding the puzzle pieces. And then editing is like painting the puzzle pieces and putting them together in whatever way you want. And I think it's such a beautiful like puzzle. I'm obsessed with the game of it, so I'm eternally, just in love with that form.
Yeah, for sure. And it works beautifully. So I want to get into, I mean, to be honest, there was quite a few and I just had to cut it down. But I'm going to go through, just three from individual segments. So from Lotus and Fear, two of my favorite passages were, let's play a party game where we have to take turns telling each other about all our fears and mistakes and take a shot each time we wish we had a time machine. I think the time machine thing really got me, linking alcohol, taking a shot, that sort of idea of bliss or that idea of escapism, and then tying it directly to a time machine, something that is pretty much well known. Everybody knows what a time machine is, but what I love is that you link them together. You linked a memory and a time machine together, and the way that you wrote that, I just thought that was great. And
Thank you.
And another short one from the same Lotus and Fear. Each day numbs me into dismissiveness until my lips are purple from wine.
I wrote that. I remember writing that so in Arizona during the summer, it rarely ever rains. Like sometimes we'll get a summer where we have a monsoon season, and it'll rain, really hard in these short bursts. But when I wrote that poem, it was during the summer, and it had not rained for some insane amount of time. It was like all over the news, like when are we going to get any sort of rain? It was like years or something. And it was the first rainstorm in as long as I could remember. And I was just sitting on the patio, wine drunk, just like in the rain, just like feeling like the rain in Arizona, it's like warm too, because it's so fucking hot, you know? So it's just a weird experience. Everything smells like rain. And it's like this feeling that you miss, like, it's like almost nostalgia in a way to like yearn for rain, you know? And I just remember sitting there and yeah, I wrote that line, and that was like the line that I built Lotus and Fear around. I wrote that one that you just said first, and then built the rest of the poem around it. And I think I do that for a lot of the pieces, honestly, is like you write the heart of the poem and then build the body around it is sometimes how
Right.
I create. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. Like you kind of capture this feeling, this entity, this spirit in a selection of words that you've conjured, and then you kind of, as you say, build around it and kind of like
Yeah.
build a, I don't know, from the foundation up, kind of build upon it. So from Lotus and Love, I loved the following. I suppose this is the way living has always been. You think you're happy until you meet that person who makes you notice every ache in your chest.
Mm.
Maybe we should drive my van into the book deposit bin and steal all the books our consciences can carry. Just, I don't know what to say. Just, I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was like, I mean, you probably have guessed that I'm a big, book nerd. You know, I love reading and stuff. And at the time, I was dating a girl, and that was like, I think that was a real thing. I asked her, like, hey, what if we like stole all those books from that book deposit bin right there? We used to meet up in that library parking lot a lot. So I that was one of those poems that made me happy to write. Like a lot of poems, either it can be healing in a way, or it can help provide clarity and confusion, or even just like acknowledge that you're feeling guilty about something or sad or regretful or whatever. But yeah, when I wrote that poem, it was basically just like, life can be really fucking hard, but it's a little easier, when you're moving through that life with someone you love. So
Yeah, no, I was reading I was rereading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've checked that one out.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a riveting piece. And kind of his conclusion of his highest value from being in the camps, the various camps that he was in, he kind of said, look, yeah, he cared about writing his book, he cared about completing the series, yeah, he cared about his possessions, yeah, he cared about his job, but at the end of the day, what was he going back to in his thoughts? He was going back to his wife, he was going back to his love. And that's
Yep.
something that he said got him through, you know, and it was genuine love for somebody else. The love never dies because it's always with him, right? And so yeah, so I just
Love that. I
I
love that
love that.
idea.
Yeah. So the last one that I want to share, a short one, from Lotus and Honesty. Lotus hurts like the moon would hurt if it was in love with the sun. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Again, a lot of the time when I was reading the book, and I think this is across the board for me personally on poetry, maybe you can agree, but like, and I was saying before we start recording that, you know, poetry specifically, but I feel like when you read great sentences that go together like that, that rhyme together like that have its own spirit. I feel like it doesn't give you this intellectual analysis at the end. It just gives you this genuine raw feeling, and I don't know why I liked that. I
Yeah.
don't know why I picked that to be, the one that I share, the last one that I share. But I just thought that I loved it. I don't know what to say, man.
I love that too. I mean, that's something I'm always reaching for, is that raw feeling you're talking about. Because, I think we can have intellectual conversations all day, and we can make intellectual points in our poems and our writing, in our discussions, whatever. But at the heart of it, we're all human, we all feel. And I think that it's continually important and vital that we allow ourselves the opportunity to feel. And that's something that I've always loved about art, you know, for me personally, is that, you know, no matter how much this world or whatever might try to harden you, you know, if that makes sense, art
Sure.
is what softens us, I think, you know.
Yeah.
And I just love that. I mean, I've always thought of poetry as a sort of magic, you know, and what you were talking about earlier about how you don't know why that line stuck with you, but it did. That's something I just, oh, I love that to death, because we don't need to understand, you know. We can just sit in that feeling and recognize, you know, what we've been through in life that maybe, you know, connects with that, and just, that's all it has to be.
Yeah, no, I do. I guess I just want to ask you, do you think that by understanding our passions thoroughly and deeply and genuinely, and understanding why we love a certain sentence in a book or a poem, do you think that would kind of negate how special it is when it happens? Like, do you think if we understood the origin of, like, oh well, I like that because, you know, something something, do you think that would kind of take it away? Because I feel like there's an element of awe
Yeah.
that ignorance has to be conjoined with, and ignorance in that regard is a blessing, because if you didn't
Yeah.
have it, then you
Oh,
would, you know, then you would be condemned to the truth, I guess,
I
of
completely
explaining
agree. No,
everything. Yeah.
it's like hearing the punchline of a joke before you hear the build up, you know.
Right.
And I think that one of the most beautiful things, you know, about what you're talking about is that it brings back that childhood wonder in a way, you know. I think that, you know, being adult, it kind of sucks sometimes, and
Yeah.
we're conditioned, you know, to sacrifice joy for logic, you know, a
Hmm.
lot. And I think that in moments like that, you know, where we're surprised, we're in awe in even a small way, you know, we're kids again. And that's everything to me, you know. Because I mean, at the heart of it, like, we're all just kids who were forced to get older, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, pummeled into a state of being that isn't so much creative as it is monotonous, you know, just so
Yeah.
it can concide into the abyss of the workplace, or the
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't want to sound too doomer, but like the capitalist sort of cycle, you know.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, and it's a way to survive, you know.
right.
It's how you're, you know, how our society is built currently. So I don't know, I mean, pushing those boundaries in any way, whether it's, you know, going to sleep a little early and reading, or, you know, writing under a tree when you could be, you know, doing something more productive, whatever. I mean, all those little acts of resistance, rebellion, like, even in small ways, they're like resistance of love, you know. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it truly is. I'm interested in you explaining your kind of reception of the book, because I saw that I've seen quite a few things that you've posted. I think you were on a TV channel, right? And you were sitting down and just chatting about the book. Um, can you go into like the reception of the book, and like how, you know, what people have said to you, how it made you feel? I'd
Yeah.
be interested in kind of how people have come to you after reading this piece.
Yeah, you know, what's been really just surprising, but also, you know, just so humbling, is when I was on tour. So the book came out March 1st, and I went on a national tour, you know, from Arizona to New York, pretty much, and everywhere in between. And I would do these shows, and they just turned into these little therapy sessions. Like, I would read these poems and talk about what I was going through, and people in the crowd would just tell me what they're going through as well. Like, I had people come up to me crying after a reading and being like, you know, my mom just died, and I really needed to hear that poem. Or, you know, I've been struggling for a while, you know, trying to get clean, but I'm going to rehab in the morning, you know. And just like stuff like that you would never expect a poem could even influence in a way. It's not like that the poem was the deciding factor in any of those, but it just a little bit of influence. I can't even understand how beautiful that is. I mean, I've gotten a lot of, you know, random messages on Instagram or Twitter, Facebook, from people who are like, you know, I read this book, and and like I have OCD as well, and I've never, read a poem that made me feel so heard, or and I'm grateful to all hell.
Yeah, no, it feels. Did you feel overwhelmed at any point, like genuinely like overwhelmed, to a point where it felt like it was hard to contain? I don't know, maybe that's too much of a deep question, but I'm really interested in how that made you feel, you
I don't
know.
think there are any questions that are too deep.
Well, I agree with you on
Yeah, I mean,
that. Yeah, sure,
like the
sure.
magnitude, I think when I started to meditate and think more on like, wow, I made this thing and it has its own life now. I don't control it anymore. There's nothing I can do. Like,
Yeah,
this book is out in the world. People can read it. People can share it. It's going to be in people's minds from now until whenever, you know what I mean? And that idea was like just a really big thing to think about. I think big is the right word, even though that's a simple word. It just felt big. The idea that this thing will live on, if I'm dead, or,
mm,
halfway across the world, there's a possibility someone could get this book and read it and feel comforted, even though I've never met them, or in 100 years that could happen. That idea, I guess, was a little overwhelming, but I just took a second and I was like, you know what? That's the power of art. And it's nothing to be afraid of, like, for me, I have a lot of guilt and a lot of fear, and it's all based a lot in part because of the OCD. Like, OCD grabs onto this thing that you love, and it just pulls fear out of it. It's like, hey, if you don't do this compulsion, this really bad thing is going to happen. And it translates to a lot of aspects of life. But what I've really learned is, if something is scary in that aspect, it means it's important. And that means I gotta just push through the discomfort. And I think that's why I just try so hard to just be honest and vulnerable and authentic, because I think that's the path to peace. That's the path to togetherness and community, and helping each other move through, in the most, in just the best way possible. I think that's how we do it. So yeah, I mean, even when it feels overwhelming for a little bit, it doesn't for long, because we can just push through that and recognize the magnitude of it, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Great answer. How did you how did you kind of get comfortable with being vulnerable?
I think that writing poems when I was a kid was my first kind of introduction to just not giving a fuck what people think. Because
Mm,
I don't know if you ever went to like public school.
yeah,
I was in these public schools, and it wasn't normal for a guy to write poems.
right.
Like, I was made fun of for that, and like people thought it was weird. I was too sensitive, I was whatever. And I think I just kept writing, and when I started performing, my first ever performance, 0 people came. It was me and like a few other people from this creative writing class. Not even the parents showed up. But like, after we did that reading just to ourselves, I was like, if I can read to no one, like, hell, how is it gonna make me feel to read to a crowd? And then I just started pushing myself, like actively putting myself in those situations that made me uncomfortable, like getting up on a stage, even if it scared me. And then I fell in love with performing, and I fell in love with sharing poetry, and I fell in love with, just trying to be a friend. Like, in addition to the writing, I run a homeless outreach program here in Phoenix. That's my job. Is I run. It's called AZ Hugs for the Houseless, and our whole mission, is to try to be a friend to those experiencing homelessness, to show people that they're respected, they have dignity, and they're not alone. Because I think loneliness is the silent killer out there on the streets.
Mhm.
So like, a lot of what I do, is sit with people and listen and talk, and just, we just be honest. And I think that writing those poems early on, I guess, kind of gave me the confidence and the strength to realize, okay, I can use what I've learned in, like, through writing these poems, and translate it to something that I think can better my community, in day-to-day work. So yeah, I think I also, my dad, has always been, just a really upstanding, example of what a man should be, in my opinion. Like, he's just the best guy I've ever met. And I think that he really taught me a lot when I was growing up about, how to not fall into these, holes of toxic masculinity, how to actively try to break them, because I think that's our responsibility as men,
Yeah.
it's our responsibility to not, you know, share our trauma or whatever with another generation of boys. It's our responsibility and duty, I think, to break that cycle, to educate, to uplift, to help heal. My dad really, really, really helped me with that and set me on that path, I think.
Yeah, no, I feel with me like, and this is kind of why I admire you in some ways, because I admire your ability to be vulnerable, and I admire your ability to kind of be you and not kind of think, any more than that in a sense. And I feel like, talking about men as well in society, I feel like that burden is, quite heavy. And it's kind of a slow process where men will feel like they can be more vulnerable. I mean, I like writing as well, and like journaling, especially recently. And it's really important, to make sure that it's somewhere other than your head. uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, because I mean, I've said this before. Like, one of the reasons why, I mean, obviously I love books and literature, that sort of thing, but one of the reasons why I began this whole YouTube charade thing is because I wanted my thoughts to go somewhere else and fling
yeah,
back and forth, and um, through a channel, through an outlet, it can kind of transcend your own head into something that you don't kind of know what will happen
yeah.
to
No,
what you produce. Yeah,
and that mystery is like, it's inspiring to me just to think about. Like, I have no clue what can happen with this thing that I made, and that's fucking great,
yeah,
and I think for me at least, I consider it, not an obligation, but something that I think is right for me. It's right for me to share these things. It's not right to withhold them, I guess. And that's just my own personal belief with the things that I make. I think that, you know, every poem or every whatever might not help someone, but one of them might. So why not share them all, I guess? And then
yeah.
yeah.
Who? So, talking about your dad being an inspiration for you, I am wondering whether it's writers or I don't know, some kind of person in the public eye, like which figures or writers or musicians, let's say, do you look up to, and how kind of, like, how have you learned from them as well?
Yeah. Well, definitely both my parents, my mom and my dad, best parents in the world. And that's something that I'm really grateful for. As I said before, I really love music as well. And one musician that I think I've learned a lot from is Mac Miller. I don't know if you've listened to
I've
Mac's
heard.
music at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you haven't, I would implore you to listen. I'll send you some recommendations.
yeah, yeah.
Faces is an album that he made, and I think it's like it's like an hour and a half long, but it's so cohesive, and it's just the most depressing and honest album I think I've heard, ever. Each song, it feels like this guy's decline, as he is just working his way up to trying not to die,
Right.
like the end song, the last song on the album is called Grand Finale. And he said that he attempted suicide, I believe, after making that song. And you can feel it in
Wow.
his words and in the sound. Like it's like this, it's a jazz rap album is the way I describe it. And he produced a lot of the tracks on it as well. And I just think that's one of my favorite albums. And he made another album right before he died. He overdosed in 2018, and it's called Swimming. And Swimming was one of those albums where I listened to it front to back on repeat for a really long time. And I think one of the cool things about that album for me is that it showed me, an album can be structured like a book of poetry, which means in turn a poetry book can be structured like an album. That's kind of the conclusion I came to. And I think making that connection helped me get to the point of where I wanted to kind of incorporate I guess that form a little bit into my book as well. Yeah, I mean, I always loved Max stuff just because, you know, he's really honest about his struggles. Like addiction was a really big thing in all his music, and he was honest about it. Like he didn't sugarcoat it, and I felt like that was really interesting and really cool. And he, you know, he also found a way to make songs that were that honest and introspective while also being universally celebrated, you know, and popular. And that's something that's really interesting to me, how to, you know, capture, you know, the hearts or the minds or whatever of a large group of people with something that's so personal. I just think that's, oh man, that's beautiful. That's really cool.
It's really interesting how, like, it's interesting how something that can be shared, I don't know, in one crowd can be kind of rejected, deflated even, but in another crowd of people that understand the content, you get this ruckus applause, and you get this mutual understanding from everybody. It's kind of like, you know, I guess it's the difference between going to a concert of one artist and literally everybody there is there because they love that music.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel the same with like an idea. I guess you could say with poetry in general, like your book, Lotus and the Apocalypse, like it's this book that speaks to people on many different levels. And when you're reading it, doing a reading with people together, everybody is there because they are there to feel something. And I love that. I love that people can actually get together and mutually kind of be in the same headspace, if you know what I mean, and like kind of share this mental energy. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to convey that, but it's like this mental energy.
That's what I love so much about a poetry reading, is it feels like such an intimate space. You know, even if you don't know the people that you're sitting next to, you're both on this, you know, emotional journey, I guess, right next to each other. It's like, for me at least, sometimes I would imagine it being like, you know, we're all on our own little personal motorcycle. We're driving down this long stretch of desert highway together. We're next to each other, but, you know, we're controlling our motorcycle, and we're, you know, figuring out which way to go, but we're all there together. And I think, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of one way that I think about, you know, exploring these ideas and these poems together. And, you know, by the end of a reading, even if you don't know someone's name, like you feel connected to them in a way. And I think that's one of the most valuable things that poetry can offer us right now, you know, in a world where, you know, it often feels really easy to be disconnected. You know, I think we need poetry now more than ever.
Yeah, well, especially your poetry, for sure. So speaking of music, I'm wondering, because you're into that sort of, I guess you're into having that same feeling when you listen to a song, maybe as I am, and I'm wondering if you've heard of Phoebe Bridgers.
Oh yeah.
I love her Stranger in the Alps. That's probably like my favorite album all time. I just love that. Smoke Signals.
Didn't she do an album with the guy from Bright Eyes too?
I can't remember, to be honest. If I don't know if she's done another one with him, but with Stranger in the Alps, at least, because I've as you can tell, probably I've listened to that like so many times over. But a bit, her music is, as you know, very sort of deep and slow, but also climatic in a way. Like it's very strong, emotionally strong and strenuous. Julian Baker's another artist a bit like that. She does kind of acoustic you know, guitar sort of stuff, and she's really great. Her song Rejoice, I would really recommend that. That will, like, I
don't think I've heard that. I'll definitely listen to
it. You might like it. It's just I feel like when we listen to music, just from how you described yourself, I feel like when we both listen to music, we kind of want this deeper feeling from it. You know, it's not just this pastime. It isn't like that. It's far deeper.
That's how I feel about it. Just reminded me, like, Phoebe's music, it feels kind of in touch and in tune with Bright Eyes as well. I think his name's Connor Oberst. You know, there's this one album with the song Luau, First Day of My Life, We Are Nowhere, and It's Now. And I don't know if you've heard that album, but that's one of my favorite albums of all time. It starts, the first song is it's a character and they're on an airplane, and it's like kind of speaking, you know, it's just like spoken word for a little bit. You know, they're on this plane and that she's feeling bored, and then the captain, you know, or the pilot, you know, starts to lose control of the plane, and they're like nosediving, and he's saying over the intercom, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And that's like the first start of the album, and then it like gets into the music. And I just like that song, having, you know, beginning the album like that, you know, in a way it made me think deeper on like, what is the most effective way to start a book or a collection or an album? Like, what do we want to accomplish in the first 2 minutes of this thing we're creating, you know? And I put some consideration, a lot of consideration into the first poem of my book as well, having that be the introduction. And I don't know. I think it's really cool. We can always learn, you know, from music, from books, from each other, from the world around us. It's just, there's constantly things that we can absorb and learn from and grow from. And that's, I love that.
Yeah. So how's your writing at the moment, post Lotus and the Apocalypse? Like, how's your motivation doing in terms of writing? Like, has it got better? Is it stagnated slightly? Like, what's your current status of writing? How are you doing in that regard?
This week I've written like 4 really good poems.
Nice.
And previously to that, I hadn't been writing a ton, you know. I try not to force it. Like, for a while when I was younger, I was like, oh shit, if I'm gonna be a writer, I gotta write every day. I gotta treat it like a 9 to 5. And then I was like, fuck that, you know, because creating doesn't have to conform to these dumbass standards of labor, you know.
Who even said that anyway? Like, it's just propaganda, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. So there's sometimes when I won't write, you know, for a month, and then there's sometimes like this week where I'll just write 4 or 5 poems. And I wrote a poem yesterday about gun violence, and I wrote a poem the day before. I was in the tent city. We call it the Zone in Arizona. It's a tent city. And I was hanging out with someone, and I wrote a poem about religion. And earlier in the week, I wrote this poem, this love poem, and I think it's one of the best love poems I've written. I really liked writing that one. So yeah, I actually at my show last night. I had a show last night, and I performed the new poems. And
nice.
People were really connected with that love poem. It seemed like.
So where could I read those? Are they coming out in like are they coming out in like a collection, or what are your plans for publication? Or
I don't know. I mean, for a while, like I got my first poem published in a magazine when I was 15, and I was like, you know, I gotta, every time I write a poem, I gotta submit it out to all these big literary magazines, and you know, it doesn't count if it's not published. And then like, fuck that. Like, I'm probably, you know, gonna share these poems just at readings. Maybe I'll send it out to get published. I don't know, but it's probably gonna be in the next book. I don't know what the next book's gonna be. I started writing a couple poems centered around OCD and aliens, like a story about like a story about a character with OCD who gets abducted by aliens. I don't know. I can definitely read the poem for you right now if you want.
Wow, well, I'd love that. Yeah, that would be an honor to read.
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
It's on my phone, so I'll have to like exit out of Zoom, but you can still hear. So
okay, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. You can still hear me all good?
All good. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a poem I wrote earlier this week. It's called Wine Drunk. Okay. Wine Drunk. Wine drunk in early summer, we hold each other close as if it's winter. Everything happens all the time. The wars, the deaths, the loss. But tonight we're safe. Each time you blink, I feel your eyelashes on my neck. Everything happens all the time. At birth, we're handed this life without knowing if we can carry its weight. Everything happens all the time, but we find ways to survive. Drugs and drink, work and sex. Some mornings I wish I were a small bug on a big leaf, but at night, all I want is to be here with you. Skin to skin on the couch, lips dark purple, inhaling each other's laugh like a cigarette. Everything happens all the time, except on a night like this. On nights like these, I imagine that some alien teens have chosen us for their school community service project and beamed us to some empty spot in space for the evening because they heard how hard it is to live on Earth. Whenever we're at a party and we have to weave through the crowd to hug a friend or pour a drink, you always leave your hand behind you for me to hold, so we both end up in the same place. I think about that sometimes when I'm alone after a long day, drinking on the balcony, listening to the lull of late night traffic. Let's stay wine drunk until morning, wine drunk until the lamps dim out, wine drunk until you have to leave. Everything happens all the time, but when my time here is nearly spent, if I get the chance to crawl into bed beside you for another night, kiss your cheek and watch you smile in your sleep, I couldn't care less how much this life has hurt. Yeah, that's one of the new ones I wrote this week. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. When will that, wow. When will that be able to, like, when would I be able to actually, read that in a new book? I'm just well, when are you going to publish that, man?
I don't know, to be honest. I really enjoy
Really good.
the idea of like a small, limited run chat book. So maybe
Yeah.
maybe I'll put out like five poem little collection thing. I don't know though. I mean, I really like to take my time with books.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I think that I could put out a little collection or something every couple months, but it wouldn't be right to me. I don't know. I mean, as I was talking to you about earlier, like every word has to be perfect. Every line has to be perfect. Every image has to be its most visceral. Every transition has to be, a seamless spin, you know what I mean? And like that poem that I just read, I like it right now, but I like to let it sit for a little bit and just, it's like, a poem is born and then instead of, forcing it out into the world, I like to let it rest, if that makes sense, and just let it sit there for a little bit.
I totally get you, man.
Like, not to say that I won't share them. Like, I'll, post all these poems probably and read them at shows and stuff. But they'll be continually evolving, like that poem that I just read you right now, in 2 months at a new show, I might have an extra stanza, or I might have cut a couple things or changed some words or whatever. And that's something that I enjoy as well, is like not withholding the poem, but letting it, be something that can grow up as I grow up as well, and then when it's, I just get a feeling in my gut when a poem is ready to live, in a book or an album or whatever. So I don't know. I think I want to aim to have a new book finished this year, and then probably published 2023 is what I'm thinking. We'll see though. We'll see. Maybe it'll take 6 years. Maybe it'll take a month. I don't know.
Well, it reminds me of that quote, art is never finished, only abandoned.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you, actually, that, because I feel like with my own stuff as well, and going back to kind of this, routine of like, well, initially thinking that you need to write like constantly, and you're kind of like looking at these, I guess Google articles that come up like how to be a real writer, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, just do it in your own way, do it in a way that you feel comfortable, and not a way that somebody else is first and foremost telling you how to do it.
Just be yourself,
you have to have your own kind of your own style, in a sense. It has to be organic for sure. But I do feel the same a lot with some things. I mean, poetry, I say this is definitely more true than not, like letting it simmer for a while, you know.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
not even looking at it, probably even forgetting about it in most cases. Like, I've forgotten about loads of stuff that I've done, and then when I go back to it, I'm like, is that did I do that, or is I don't I don't remember it, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I think I'd add a bit there, or I wouldn't, or you know, and I like how, I guess it's just seeing something from a fresh set of eyes, you know, like
Yeah.
kind of like, and I think also experiencing new things shapes also how you edit the work as well, you know, because
I
maybe you've
agree.
experienced
Yeah.
something new and it's now relevant to, you know, to add it in, or to edit something, to take away something. Yeah, I
Right.
think
And
it's
you
an
can
ongoing
bring that,
process.
yeah, and
Yeah,
you can bring that to the new draft. And, you know, I think with some poems that I write, you know, there's an urgency to share them. Like a poem, like I wrote a poem yesterday, 10 minutes before my show. I just sat down and I wrote this poem, just thinking about the gun violence epidemic here in America.
yeah,
Um, you know, it was a poem I wrote about school shootings, and I didn't edit it, and then I just shared it, you know, at the show with people because I thought it was wrong to withhold that poem. Like I thought maybe it won't do anything, but maybe sharing it right now will help someone think more critically
mm,
about guns, you know, and the need
yeah.
for better gun control.
If
Um,
it, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
but you know, a poem like the one I just read you right now, that's a love poem, you know, and I think it speaks to the idea right now. Like I don't know about you, but I have felt for a while now that everything is chaotic and it never stops being chaotic. It's just there's always a million things going on. There's always death and tragedy and loss, and there's always distractions, and there's always things to enjoy, and those all are swirling about at the same time forever. And that's really what I started writing the poem about was just that idea. And I think that it's important, you know, nice to share that, but I don't think it's as urgent, I guess, in my mind as, you know, a poem about gun violence. Even if the poem
mm,
doesn't accomplish anything, even if it doesn't do anything, there's
yeah,
always the idea that it could, that it might be able to.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah, because you never know. You just never
you never
know
know.
how somebody is going to, whoever walks in, you know, there to listen
Yeah,
to what
yeah,
you say. You just there's no indication. There's no
yeah. Well, I
guarantee.
mean,
Yeah.
so last summer, musician Joe Alley and I we recorded a jazz poetry album about homelessness, and it, you know, it's called Street Sorrows. It's on all streaming services and stuff. And we put it out, you know, to tell these stories and process, you know, these experiences I was having on the streets, but to also try to break down a lot of these stigmas around homelessness in Arizona.
Mm.
And I didn't really, you know this was going to happen, but I got messages from people who were like, "Hey, I heard that song on the radio, and I went and, you know, brought some food to this guy who was on this side of the street corner, and oh, you know, I heard that this one poem, you know, that you did and on the radio or whatever, or on your album, and I, you know, I took out a couple bucks and gave it to someone, or I smiled at someone, or, you know, sat down for a conversation with someone. And that was the goal with that album, you know, not even knowing when I made it that could happen, you know, but it's cool because it lives on, you know, and it has its own impact. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
honored and blessed in that aspect. It's interesting, you know.
So before we close, I'm interested in getting your favorite books, like favorite poets, maybe favorite poetry books. I'd be interested in hearing what your recommendations would be, and your inspirations as well.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I really fell in love with slam poetry. And there's this poet named Neil Hilborn, and he wrote a poem called OCD. And it was the first anything that I'd ever read about OCD that, you know, I was like, oh my God, I experienced that thing that he's talking about. And I'd never really heard anyone else talk about it, like not in a song or a poem or a book or whatever. And that poem, it's not like it's, I don't know. The reason it impacted me so much, I think, is because I I realized that, oh my God, I can talk about these things too. You know, like this guy's talking about his experiences with OCD, and he's fine. Like
Mm.
he's using that as, like it's liberating, and I was like, oh my God, I have to create something and I have to share it, and maybe I can help someone else with that. And then like that was one of those moments, I think key early on, where it just kind of clicked. Like, this is what a poem can do for me and for my community. There's this book by Terrence Hayes called American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. And that's a really cool book of poetry if you get a chance.
Okay. Yeah.
Each poem is titled the same thing. Each poem is called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. And it deals with, racism and, all these various social and political issues, and, Trump and Trumpism, throughout the book. And it's a really fucking awesome book. There's a poet here in Arizona. Her name's Rosemarie Dombrowski, and she's the Phoenix Poet Laureate, and just like a really impactful teacher for me. She's written a few books that are really incredible. She's just like a really amazing speaker. And what I kind of learned from her was how poetry can be political and how poetry can enact, some sort of social impact, I guess. It doesn't have to be all about the self or, relationship. It can be about the wider world around you. And I thought that was really cool. There's so many poets. There's Natalie Diaz. I don't know if you've heard of her work.
No.
But yeah, so she's I never got to take a class with her, but she was a professor at ASU, and she just won, I think, the Pulitzer, or no, she won the National Book Award. I think that's what it was for. I believe that's what it was. One of this just sort of crazy, awesome award for her latest book, and that's one I definitely recommend as well. Growing up, I read a lot of Ray Bradbury. That was he was one of the authors that, like, my dad introduced me to Ray Bradbury when I was super young. And I remember just this memory I have being a kid and him telling me, read this short story, Austin. It's like 4 pages. And then tell me, like why you think this story is different than a lot of the other short stories you've read in class or whatever. And I did. And I remember thinking, like, this short story is just a poem, like each word feels perfect in Ray Bradbury's work. And these paragraphs could be stanzas. And like, I just thought that was so interesting, but he found a way to make it, in long form as well, like novels and 15-page short stories. And I think I remember reading something as well that before writing a short story, his warm-up would be to write a poem. And I just think that's really cool. There's one Ray Bradbury poem that I remember. It's about space. If you look up like Ray Bradbury poems, there's like one, don't remember the name of it, but it's really cool. So
okay, yeah.
I read a lot of his work even still. I love his writing. And Kurt Vonnegut. I'm from Indiana. That's where I was born. And Vonnegut is like, he was from Indiana as well. And his book Slaughterhouse-Five.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. That was a book that I like, really just blew my mind the first time I read it, because like it's not. It doesn't have a traditional timeline, like there's a lot of story forms, that people use. And I remember watching something that Vonnegut said in a talk. He was giving like a lecture, and he was like, these are the traditional story formats. This is like, and he like drew it on this blackboard, and there was like multiple of them. And he was like, but what if we go in between? He just like scribbled all around. And that's what Slaughterhouse-Five is. Like, it goes between time and space and various, but it's interconnected, and you can understand the narrative in like a coherent fashion. But I don't know. That's a really innovative book, I think,
Yeah, no, I want to check that one out. Because I've heard of that one. It's quite a popular one. I have read Fahrenheit
451.
I read it a few years ago now, and that was really good.
That's what I think. That's probably Bradbury's most famous.
I need to read more of his work. Well, now that you've reminded me of him, and
definitely read his short stories if you
can.
No,
I haven't heard he's done short stories. That's really cool. I want to check those out.
Are some of the best pieces of writing I think I've ever read. And there's this one book called The Illustrated Man that Ray Bradbury wrote, and it's about, I don't want to give too much away, but like the illustrated man is this guy with tattoos. Like his whole body is covered in these tattoos, and each tattoo is a short story. So the whole book is literally like you're moving tattoo from tattoo down this guy's body through the book, and it's so cool, because it deals with so many very important topics, and they're just like such beautiful writing. Like some of these stories are 2 pages long or 3 pages long, and they're short, like they're really small, but you have to reread them like 6 times, and some of them are a little longer. But like one thing that I love about his work is some of his short stories really reminded me of The Twilight Zone, which was a TV show that I probably my favorite TV show ever. If you've never watched it, you should definitely.
I've heard like raving good things about it.
Yeah, I mean, The Twilight Zone, it's hosted by Rod Serling, and it's like a serialized series, and each episode, like there's some that I would say this is a perfect piece of TV media. Like this is how you create art in a 25-minute program. That there's my favorite one. I'm trying to remember the exact name of the episode, because if you're going to watch one, I'd love for you to watch this one.
Yeah.
It's called, that's what it's called. It's called Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? That's the title of the episode.
Okay.
And it's about this busload of people, and they're driving through a snowstorm, and they get a call that, the bridge is broken. So they have to stop in this town late at night, and they stop at this diner. And they all go into the diner, and the bus driver, they realize that there's one extra person in the diner that was on the bus, and there was no one else in there before. And they get a call from the police saying there's been a UFO sighting, and like it's all over the news stuff. It's crazy. So the police come to the diner and come to the conclusion that one of these 17 people is an alien, and you have to figure out who it is. It's just it is so amazing.
Yeah,
so,
I love sci-fi sort of stuff like that. And how long is it? Did you say they're quite short? They're like what, 25 minutes or something like that?
Yeah, they're 24, 25 minutes. Before, they're made in the 50s, 60s, so like from what I've seen, a lot of TV shows now are like 22 minutes, and there's more commercials, but yeah, the Twilight Zone, I would say each episode is 25 minutes long, and that's probably my favorite one ever. So definitely check it out.
Well, you've given me a lot of homework. I'll get back to you, man. I'll get back to you on that front. I'll definitely check that out, because I've heard like really good things, and Bradbury's short stories. And so also good. your music suggestions as well. I appreciate that. I'm always looking for new good music. Music is
definitely check out Matt.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with Nietzsche when he said, "Without music, life would be a mistake." Yeah. Anyway, thank you for coming on the podcast, Austin. It's been really a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you.
James, thank you so much, not only for having me on your show, taking the time to sit down and discuss it, but seriously, thank you so much for reading the book and just being so thoughtful about it. Like that really means the world to me. That has made my day, that you put so much thought and time into, picking your favorite lines and stanzas, and, thinking about how it relates to yourself and the wider world. And like, that's really just such an honor that you do that. So thank you.
Your book is all worth worth that effort. I mean, it's a thought-provoking book by definition, as far as I'm concerned. So that's just a natural progression of things. Just congratulations on the book again. It's just brilliant. Anyway, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon, I hope. Thank
you so much, my friend. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, man.
You too. See ya.